known as DRY, dry. Don't repeat yourself. Instead of repeating several lines of code every time you want to perform a particular task, use a function that will allow you to write a block of Python code once and then use it many times. This can help reduce the overall length of your programs, as well as give you a single place to change, test, troubleshoot, and document any given task. Ultimately, this makes your application much easier to maintain in the long run. To create a function, use the def keyword followed by the name of the function. Always follow the function name with a set of parentheses. If your function accepts parameters, you may include the name of those parameters within the parentheses, separating them with commas. Finally, conclude the function definition line with a colon. The code block that follows the function definition will be executed anytime the function is called. So the pattern is def space function name parentheses colon, and inside the parentheses you can have parameters. Okay, so this is a very simple function. We've got def say hello parentheses colon. Underneath this definition we have one indent with one tab, or it can be 4 spaces or 2 spaces, but you have to be consistent. So I'm using a tab, and then I've got the line print hello. If you attempt to execute this code, nothing appears to happen because the function is defined but never called. When calling a function, you must ensure that you include the parentheses. Okay, so again, we've got def say hello, and the function simply prints hello. Okay, if we run this, nothing happens. We have to call it by specifying the name of the function with parentheses afterwards, and it will then output hello. Okay, so all this function does, the say hello function will print hello. So whenever you call it, it will output hello. Let's just take a look at this in the Python interpreter. So I'm at the command prompt. I'll start Python. To define the function, we type def say hello, that's our function name, parentheses, and a colon. Notice that there's 3 dots to show that we're now within our function definition. We need to have an indent, so I'll press tab. Okay, and then our next line is just print hello. Okay, that's the end of our function, so I'm just going to press enter to get out of that. And notice that nothing happened. All we've done is to create the function definition, but we don't see anything happening. So what we need to do now is to call the function. So I'm going to type say hello with parentheses, and you see it says hello. Okay, so that's the basics for creating a function. Functions need to be defined before they can be called. Define your functions at the top of your Python program. Here you'll see what happens if you try to use a function that has not been defined. Okay, so if you try to call the function and then define it, then the output will say name error, name say hello is not defined. Okay, so we've tried calling a function and then defining the function, but because it isn't defined yet, this will create this error. So now let's extend the function so that it accepts a parameter. Try to think of parameters as variables that can be used inside of the function. The pattern is def function name, parentheses, and the name of the parameter, or a list of parameters, and then the colon. So here we've got def say hello name, and inside the function it says print hello, and it's going to format the name. So it's going to say hello and whatever the value of name is, and then an exclamation mark. So if we now call say hello Aaron, it will output hello Aaron. If you say hello everybody, it will then output hello everybody. Let's now try to create a function with a parameter. Okay, so I'll say def say hello. Now I've already got a function say hello. I can't create a second one, so I'm going to give it a new name. I'll call it say hello 2 name. So name is the parameter. And again, we'll notice the 3 dots. So now we need an indent. Then we'll type print. We're going to print this string. We're going to format it. And so it's going to include whatever the value of name is. Okay, when I press enter, we're still at the 3 dots. I have to press enter again. Okay, so now it's created say hello 2, and it's expecting a parameter. Okay, so let's try it. It says say hello 2, and I'll just say Joe. And you see that it says hello Joe. So it's called this new function, and it's formatted the string with the name that was passed as a parameter. We can try that again with any other name. Okay. And let's just try this. We'll skip ahead a bit. If we try it without the parameter, we will get an error because it's expecting that parameter. It gives a type error. Say hello 2 is missing one required positional argument, name. And we also wanted to see what happens if we try to call a function before we've created it. So let's say we're going to have a function say hello 3, but we haven't created it yet. So it says name error, say hello 3 is not defined. So you have to define the function before you call it. Once you've defined a parameter, the function will expect and require a value for that parameter. The actual value specified for a function parameter when the function is invoked is sometimes called the argument. If one is not provided, you will encounter an error. Okay, so here we've got our same function. We define say hello with a name for the parameter. And then if we call it without specifying the argument, then we get a type error. Say hello is missing one required positional argument, name. Okay, so it's saying that we haven't specified name. If you'd like to make the parameter optional, set a default value for it by using the equal sign. The pattern is define function name, parameter name equals default value. Close the parentheses and go on. So here we've got define say hello, and we've got a parameter name, and we set it equal to the string there. And then we print hello and whatever the name is. So if you call the function without specifying the parameter, it will then say hello there because the default value is there. But if you say hello and you specify the parameter, then it will say hello Aaron because we specified Aaron. So it doesn't use the default name, it will use the name that was specified. Let's try this now in the Python interpreter. So now we're going to create another function. Let's call this hello 3 since we haven't used that yet. And now we'll have a default parameter because we'll specify that name has a default. So the default is there. Tab. Enter, enter. And now if we say hello, 3 Joe, it will say hello Joe. If we say hello 3 and we don't specify any parameter, because there's a default parameter, it will use that. So it says hello there, because there is the default. Keep in mind that functions are capable of accepting multiple parameters. All you need to do is include them within the parentheses of the function definition and separate them with a comma. When you are calling the function, always supply the arguments and separate them with commas as well. So here we've got a function, we define say hello with first, comma, last. And now in our function, we're going to print hello and first and then last. So we call say hello and we specify Josiah and Carberry separated by a comma, then it will output hello Josiah Carberry. When parameters are accepted by a function, they can also be called positional parameters. This is because their order is important. Notice that Josiah was assigned to first, while Carberry was assigned to last. You can also explicitly pass variables into a function by name. Whenever you are calling the function, make sure to supply the parameter name, followed by the equal sign, and then the value for that parameter. When using named parameters, order is not important. Here's an example. So we've got our same function. We define say hello, first, comma, last, and it's going to print hello with first and then last. And then if we call it and we specify first equals Josiah, comma, last equals Carberry, it's going to set first to Josiah and last to Carberry. So it will output hello Josiah Carberry. But we can also call say hello and we specify last equals Carberry, comma, first equals Hank. So now first is set to Hank, last is set to Carberry, so it's going to say hello Hank Carberry. It is also possible to combine required and optional parameters, as in this following example. If you use both required and optional parameters, the required parameters should come first. Okay, so here we define say hello. First is a required parameter because there's no default value. And then last is an optional parameter because we've specified a default value. So when we call this function, it's going to print hello, first name and last name. So if we call with say hello Josiah, it will say hello Josiah Carberry because Carberry is the default value for last. If we call it with Hank, comma, Mobley, then it will say hello Hank Mobley because now Mobley replaces the default value for the last name. So let's try a few of these in the Python interpreter. Okay, so here we've got say hello. I'm going to call this say hello 4. We've got the first parameter is called first, the last parameter is called last, and it's a default parameter, so it's optional. Tab, it will print hello first and then last. Okay, press enter again. Okay, so now I can call this with just the first parameter specified. Or I can call it with both parameters specified. Okay, and again, I'm going to just skip ahead here. We can also specify the parameters. Instead of just assuming the defaults, we can say that we want first to be Josiah and last to be Mobley. Or we can say last is Josiah and first equals Mobley. So in other words, we don't have to put them in the correct order or in the same order as they're defined, but if we want to do it out of order, we need to specify the parameter names.
Often the first statement of a function is a documentation string, or docstring for short. You can create a docstring by surrounding text with 3 double quotes. This docstring will offer a brief summary of the function. When writing the docstring, make sure you ask yourself, what does this function do, or why does this function exist? You can access this docstring by using the built-in help function. Pass the name of the function you want more information about to help. Type Q to exit the help screen. So here we've got a function. We define say hello, first, comma, last, and last is an optional parameter with a default value of Carberry. And then we've got a docstring. So we're saying that this function is going to say hello. This is explaining what the function does. Okay, now the function is going to print hello, first name and last name. So if we want to find out what this function does, we can type help say hello. Say hello is the name of the function. It will then output help on function say hello in module main. Say hello, first, last equals Carberry. So it shows you how the function is defined, and then it displays the docstring. So it will say hello. So you use the docstring to document all your functions.
Okay, so let's just try to add a docstring. So I'll create a new function, hello5, tab, and now we want a docstring, so it's triple quotes, triple inverted commas, and now we have to document this function. Okay, so the document for this is simply say hello to a person. Okay, now we haven't defined the function yet, so tab again, and it's going to say hello to that person. Okay, press enter again. Okay, so before I say hello5, I want to find out what does hello5 do. So I can type in help and say hello5. And you can see that it displays what I put in those triple inverted commas. Say hello to a person, missing the space there.
Okay, and then the docstring doesn't affect what the function does, so we can call our function, say hello5. Okay, so the function works the same as before.
Not only are functions capable of performing a task, they can also return data by using the return statement. This statement makes it possible for you to return any data type that you require. Once the return statement is called, no further code in the function will be executed. The following code is a function that returns a string. Okay, so we define even or odd with parameter number. Our docstring says determine if a number is even or odd or even. Okay, so the code is if number modulo 2 is equal to 0, then it's going to return the string even. Else, so if it's not 0, it's going to return odd. Okay, so if we call this function by setting a new variable equal to even or odd 9, and then we print even or odd string, it's going to say odd. Okay, because 9 was passed as number, and number modulo 2, okay, 9 modulo 2 is 1, so it's going to return odd.
Right, and being able to return a value is very important in functions. So let's see how we can do this. So I'm going to create a new function, define, I'll call it even or odd, and supply a number as a parameter. We now know that it's important to document our functions. So I'm going to tab, put in the document string, and so this function will determine if a number is odd or even. So we're going to say if number modulo 2 is equal to 0, then it must be an even number because it's divisible by 2. Okay, now remember we need 2 indents because now we're in our if block. So I've put in another indent. So we're going to return the string even. Okay, 1 indent, else, 2 indents, return odd. Okay, that's the end of our function. So I press enter again. Okay, so we can say print even or odd 9. Okay, so we're passing 9 as number. So if number modulo 2 is 0, it's going to return even, otherwise it's going to return odd. Okay, 9 is odd because 9 modulo 2 is equal to 1. If I try an even number, it says even. Okay, and remember we've got our help. If we want to know what this function does, we type in help, even or odd, and it tells us determine if a number is odd or even.
See the following example for a similar function that returns a Boolean. So we've got a function define is odd number, and our docstring is determine if a number is odd. So if the number modulo 2 is 0, then we return false, otherwise we return true. So if we call print is odd 9, then it's going to return true because again 9 modulo 2 is 1, so it's not equal to 0, so it's going to return true. So in other words, any function can return any type. Okay, functions can call other functions. For example, here we've got a function. We define the function getName. It gets and returns a name. So we say name is equal to input what is your name, and then it returns name. Okay, so this function, when we call getName, it's going to display what is your name and wait for the user to enter a string, and then it's going to return that string. Now we've got another function, sayName, and we pass it a parameter name, and the docstring is sayName. We're going to print your name is and the value of name. And we've got a third function, get and sayName. Docstring here is get and display a name. So it's going to set a new variable name is equal to get name. So it's calling this function, and then it's going to call sayName, this function, with name. So if we now call get and sayName, that calls this function, and this function calls get name, and then it calls sayName. So the output is, what is your name? The user has to type some name. So let's say he types Aaron, and then it outputs your name is Aaron.
So let's try this, but this is now quite a long piece of code. So let's rather put this into a text file and then we'll run it in Python. Okay, so to do this, I'm going to open up a folder. So let's go to our folder here. I'm going to create a new text file. I'll just say new text document. I'll call it test. And it's not a text document, it's a Python document. So I'm going to end it with .py. And it will say, if you change a file name extension, the file might become unusable. Are you sure you want to change it? Yes. Okay, so Windows now sees that this is a Python file. I'm going to open it with a text editor. Okay, and I'm going to copy all of the code in here. So we've got define get name, and that's the name function. And we've got define sayName, so this is the sayName function. Define get and sayName, so this is the get and sayName function. And after having defined all three functions, we're going to call get and sayName. So get and sayName will set name equal to get name. So get name will get the name by displaying what is your name, and that will return the name. So name is now equal to whatever the person entered, and then sayName will call sayName, and it will print your name is and name. Okay, so let's see what happens. I'm going to save this. Okay, let's just see what's in the folder here. Okay, and you see it's created this file, test.py. Okay, so now I'm going to call it by saying Python test.py. It asks, what is your name? I'm going to say Jack. And it says your name is Jack. Okay, so we created three functions, and one function called the other two functions.
Okay, and that's all there is to functions. So to review, a function is a block of reusable code that can perform an action as well as optionally return data. A function can be called only after it has been defined. A function is defined by the basic pattern def for define, function name, whatever name you want to give it, then inside parentheses, 0 or more parameter names separated by commas, and then a colon. A function is capable of accepting parameters. To make a parameter optional, simply supply a default value for that particular parameter. And remember that if you mix default with required parameters, the default parameters have to come at the end of the list. You can supply a docstring as the first line of your function in the triple quotes. The return statement will exit the function and pass back anything that follows return. Remember, that's the last statement it will execute, so anything that comes after return is ignored. And then use the built-in help function to get assistance with a particular object. When supplying a function to help, the docstring enclosed within the function will be displayed. The exercise, fill-in-the-blank word game. This exercise involves creating a fill-in-the-blank word game. Try prompting the user to enter a noun, a verb, and an adjective, using the provided responses to fill in the blanks and then display the story. So first write a short story, and then you remove one noun, one verb, and one adjective. You create a function that asks for input from the user, create another function that will fill in the blanks in the story you've just created, and you have to ensure that each function contains a docstring. That's just to document your code. After the noun, verb, and adjective have been collected from the user, display the story that has been created using their input. As usual, I've skipped over the solution. Let's just see, the output from this exercise should be something like, enter a word that is a noun, and the user has to enter a noun. Enter a word that is a verb, and the user has to enter a verb. Enter a word that is an adjective, and the user has to enter an adjective. And then it should say, here is the story you created, enjoy, and then this is the story. I never knew anyone that hadn't hid at least, okay, so hid was the verb, at least once in their life, except for vivacious, so that's the adjective, old Aunt Polly. She never hid, so that's the verb, not even when that unicorn, so that's the noun, came to town. Okay, so your code should ask the user to enter a noun, a verb, an adjective, and then it will say, here's the story, and it should display the story. Okay, that's the end of chapter 4, functions. The next chapter is chapter 5, lists. We'll see you then.